Hello and welcome back to the show, Doug. How are you doing?
I'm very good, Dan. Nice to see you. It's been a while.
It has. I was just having a think about when you were last on the show because it does seem like you're on quite regularly, but actually it was last September 23, so over a year ago.
That's when I set up Cuil Bay and it acquired Raccoon. And it's been a very
Absolutely.
interesting year.
Absolutely. And I know we're going to talk about some very recent activity that you've kindly come on to talk about, some investments and some acquisitions and some deals that have been going on. And then we're going to be talking about generally about the industry. But before we
Yeah.
do that, Doug, you've just referenced it. Let's just roll back for those that aren't aware. Last September, when I had you on, you were talking about the establishment of Q. I can still never say it.
Cool.
You know what?
As
I
in
promised
cool.
myself as well I was going to get it right. I was sort of practicing off camera. I completely failed. Cool. I know.
Cool.
Cool. Yeah, cool. I'll just stop saying it. Bay Capital. I'm not cool enough to say Cuil Bay Capital. For those that aren't aware, just give us a brief sort of summary as to why you set it up, its purpose, etc.
Well, it's a common theme in how things are developing was, having, built up Tarsus being sold to Informa. I wanted to carry on in the industry, but the sole purpose really was I didn't want to be a CEO again. I wanted to help entrepreneurs, and the last year I've been working with Mike Seaman. I mean, Mike established Raccoon. Raccoon was a UK focused consumer business, and the strategy that Mike and myself were working on was how do we diversify that? Diversify it by geography and move it into the US, and diversify it in terms of not just consumer but B2B. And in the last year, we've achieved both of those objectives. We're now got a portfolio of 20 shows now. We've got 50 odd people, and
50 odd people or 50 people?
well, they probably don't think they're odd, but over 50 people. Thank you for clarifying. And 10 of those shows are in the US. We've got a major launch for next year in Amsterdam. So the whole internationalization and the move to B2B has moved at quite a pace. So it's been an active year, but a very good year.
Yes, because I had Mike on, I think it was January or February this year when you announced the acquisition of Abilities Expo. And obviously you've referenced, I guess that's a good chunk of the additional people and additional shows
Yeah.
that you now own and run. So we're going to come to present day and announcements that some of us have just read about and others we read about last week. We're going to take them in turn, if that's all right. But then I'm also interested to just understand if there's like a common thread between them. Let's start with Jacobs Media.
Yeah.
Talk to us about the whys and where, how that fits into sort of your vision. I understand also it's not a Cuil Bay Capital deal. It's a personal one. So, yeah, give us a flavour of Jacobs Media, I guess, firstly, what they do for those that aren't aware and why it was of interest to you.
Yeah, maybe just a little bit of sort of history. So, Jacobs Media set up by Clive Jacobs. He is a travel entrepreneur. So he has basically built up and sold numerous businesses within the travel sector. He basically acquired from Reed Business Information in 15 years ago, so 2009, Travel Weekly, which was a print title. And over the last 15 years, he's gone what I'd call a sort of classical sort of migration of a media business. So, he had Travel Weekly, he then bought The Caterer, also from Reed, print titles, which have now gone digital, and he then built up an events business. And out of the UK, he's globalized that. And where he sits today is he's got a business where the majority of the revenue comes from events, and print is about less than 10% of the business. So it's gone through a big sort of change. Also, geographically, it was a UK-based business. And 3 years ago, Clive moved to Dubai and set up a business there. And like anything, once you base yourself somewhere else, you begin to focus your investment around your location. So he's been building up in Dubai. Anyway, cut a long story short, we got introduced over a year ago by a mutual friend, and he's been talking to me about getting involved. And I have come on board. I've taken a minority stake in the business. I've bought out his minority investors. So it's just him and myself as the shareholders, and obviously the management have got an interest as well. And the whole premise really is how do we accelerate the growth and take it to the next stage, principally around events, global, and moving from smaller events to larger scale events in travel. And the travel industry is continuing to grow. It's seen a strong bounce post pandemic, and the Middle East in particular is exciting. Obviously, I have had a long history of working in Dubai, with the Dubai Air Show being our flagship exhibition at Tarsus. I've got a lot of good connections there. That region at the moment is booming. We hear a lot about Saudi, but it's not just about Saudi. The UAE, Qatar, Bahrain are all growing very, very strongly. So there's lots of opportunities, and that's really why I'm excited. So a similar model to what I did with Mike. I'm coming in and helping him as the entrepreneur sort of globalize that business, totally focused on the travel sector. So we're not looking to diversify out of that. It's really focused on that, and particularly the international expansion and around the Middle East in particular.
And is it a business? I'm always interested to know when I read about acquisitions whether it's part opportunistic or it's strategic or it's a combination of both. In this particular one, is it something you had your eye on for a while, or was it something that's come up, as you say, through a meeting that you introduced? Tell us about the decision making
Well,
behind
it's been over a year, and it was all really around sort of ticking my boxes, which was I wanted to work with entrepreneurs and help them. And with regards to Clive, it was we didn't know each other, and we've spent that year getting to know each other, and we've got a lot in common, and he's got complementary skills to mine. So it became quite evident to me that it would work. He's got a good management team, and he's ambitious to do things. So he ticked a lot of those boxes, but also in terms of how I think about how I want to expand my business is I want to focus, not only on entrepreneurs, but I want to focus on two key markets, and that is the US, which is the biggest exhibition market in the world, where I've got a lot of experience, and the Middle East, where again I've got a lot of experience. So it really ticked those boxes, but it took a lot of time for us to get to sort of know each other and agree a plan of what we're going to do, which is actually quite a good thing. It was a good courtship rather than an opportunistic meeting. Let's do a deal, bang. It's been slow and well thought out.
Sure. And you were telling me sort of before we went and press record on this that it's not an investment through Cuil Bay. It's a personal
Yeah.
investment through, I think you said, a family vehicle. For those that are interested to know the reasons behind that, can you just share some thoughts behind that?
Yeah, well, I basically wanted to separate out, if you like, my majority investments, which is Raccoon, and we've done obviously a number of investments through Raccoon, obviously Abilities you mentioned in the US, and a couple of others that we did last week, which we'll talk about in a minute. So the investment in Jacobs is a minority investment, so I wanted to keep my majority and my minority investments separate. And there are different types of businesses. The this is purely focused on travel. It's got a history in the media. It's got a very strong series of brands in that community, where the Raccoon business is in healthy and active and passion-led communities. And it's more what I would call a classical show business, whereas Jacobs is, it's a media business that's actually migrated into the event side and is on quite a rapid international expansion.
Sure, because when I had a look around, they've obviously got some strong digital assets as well
Yeah.
within their portfolio. How exciting is that for you as we continue to sort of build communities, I guess, around events?
Yeah, I mean, I've spent a lot of time sort of talking to the management team about the various brands, and I mean, go anywhere in the travel world, Travel Weekly is one of the strongest brands. Um, so that is really the calling card of the business. But the international expansion is coming from the events, and particularly Connections, which is moving more into the luxury market. People are wanting to spend more money on their holidays. They're wanting experiences. All of the things that we were deprived of during the pandemic, people are now saying, well, actually, we want to live and we want to go to places. We want to do something different. And in terms of prioritizing their spend, that travel experience is a key part of actually how they spend their spare cash.
And you mentioned the Middle East as an opportunity for expansion. Why there? And is it specifically because of that region, or because of travel, or both of them?
I think it's both. I mean, the region is booming, and I think we've spoken before about, I think the Middle East is quite clearly grabbing market share in our industry, probably at the detriment of continental Europe. When companies are thinking about how they allocate their budgets, it's going more and more to the Middle East because it's expanding. You've got governments who are very supportive of our industry, and because it's growing strongly, there's more opportunities there. And in the travel market, travel is a key component for the Middle East. Dubai is the biggest international airport in the world, and just last year, over 60% of people who are going to Dubai are actually staying in Dubai and actually not using it to go somewhere else, where historically Dubai was a connecting hub. So it's changed. People are coming to the Middle East. They're looking for more experiences. Saudi is investing heavily in attracting tourism. There's some really high-end luxury opportunities there. And that's where I think the excitement from my perspective comes, is that the Middle East is a relatively young market with lots of opportunities, and is growing fast. And we've got an office there now, and the principal is based there. So I'm looking forward to spending more time out there.
Well, thank you. And just finally on that, I'm interested to hear what you said about possibly the expansion into the Middle East, what is to the detriment of continental Europe. What can Europe and the UK be doing to keep in line and keep pace with the Middle East and other
Well, I think that we're seeing a change. If you look at continental Europe, particularly Germany, and I think this is really aimed at, if you like, the change in the German shows. They used to dominate. Now with the pandemic, there's more regional allocation of budget. The big shows are not as big, and people are now looking for other opportunities, and the Middle East is really taking that up. Will the German market get back? I'm not sure it will. I think we're seeing a permanent change here. And that's why, the Germans have been very good at moving some of their big brands around the world. I think they're recognizing that actually it's not all about Germany. You've got to have a network, and they've got big businesses in the Middle East. They've got big businesses in Asia, maybe not as strong in the US. But I think they recognize that the Middle East is a key part of their future growth.
I want to move on to the other announcement, more recent one, a few days later than the Jacobs Media one. Raccoon Media Group unveiling an animal health division, and the appointment of a new CEO for that division as well, Nicole Cooper from Touchpoint Live. Talk to me about this. It represents quite a significant, I guess, possibly shift in terms of the types of shows and the events. Tell us about this, where it's come from, and how it's evolving.
Well, I think it's just really an execution of the strategy that I've been working with Mike on. In that we we want to build up in passion-led communities, and obviously animals are very much passion-led. People will spend money on their animals before they'll spend money on their children.
I've got.
I mean, it's
If I turn the camera around, Doug, well, I'm not going to. You'll see that I've got both a cat and a dog lying in front of me. So I think the dog's
two dogs
is
through
just
there.
pricked up, actually. But there you go. Yeah, I agree with you.
And we've been looking at this sector for some time, and it fits with our move into B2B. So we've done two acquisitions. We've bought the Pet and Aquatics trade show from Gordon Thomas, who's built that up over the last 15 years. It's the leading show in the UK. He is just moving it this year from Telford to the NEC. So in 25, it'll be in the NEC. And then for the last 3 years, we've had an equestrian show that we launched within Raccoon. So we're now buying Beta, which is the Beta International, which is the association trade show. And that will also move to the NEC. So it's basically, if you look at animal health, the two dominant threads in terms of animals is it's horses and dogs. And that's really where the spend goes. So it obviously grew dramatically through the pandemic and has continued to grow at quite a good pace. So that's positive. And then really to drive this forward, we've brought in Nicole Cooper to sort of drive this forward. She's been in this market for a long time, very experienced operator, and it really signals that this is the start of what we see as quite an exciting expansion of a new division within Raccoon. That the animal health has got a lot of opportunities in the UK, but also internationally. So we've got a big program that we want to execute over the next few years.
You mentioned that in 2022, Raccoon launched the equine show. So this would seem like a natural development for that division. Is it possible to, if not give us the exact numbers of the deal, but just a sense of the size of the events that you've bought, try and give us some benchmarks and maybe the size of the market as well, specifically to start off in the UK, and then we can maybe talk about international?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to come in, and it will be one of our large the pets show, the pet component is going to be one of our larger shows. It's obviously B2B, which accelerates that move, and it's grown really well. Not, as I said, not just because of the pandemic, but post-pandemic, it's been growing at a very good rate. So we're pleased about that. The horse market is slightly different, more mature, and we really see a lot of crossover with the pet show. So they will co-locate at the NEC, and obviously we've got experience there already in that horse market in terms of the consumer side. So that there's a lot of crossover. So it's a very logical move. So the horse market more mature and the pace of growth less, whereas the pet market is growing at a good pace with different components coming in from not only dogs, but obviously it's got aquatics. Aquatics has been growing well. and bringing in new sections like grooming rather than just the normal products that you would see at Pets at Home, etc. Those would be the classic products, and people like Pets at Home would be, if you like, the buyers who would be coming to the show. In terms of the international component, I mean, there's a number of big shows already in Europe, big one in Germany, big one in Italy. And then in America, there's big shows, and they are totally dominated by associations. So I think there's big shows in existence, but I think there's opportunities to do something that's more niched. And like any market, the opportunities are, there's niches within the big shows that are not being well served. And I think being nimble, being entrepreneurial, having somebody like Nicole who knows the market, that's where we see the opportunity.
Well, I was going to ask you about that appointment and how I guess essential was that to the deal? Because obviously having Nicole, who previously was at Touchpoint, if I'm not mistaken, they ran Dogfest and a number of other in that market. Would you do this deal without someone like Nicole coming on board again? How strategic and opportunistic is it? Do they if people were listening, does it always, do you have to have that person heading it up from day one? Give us a flavour of the timing, because it's not always easy to get the timing right, I guess, for all these different parts coming together.
Well, I think in terms of the expansion, we've grown quickly. We needed someone to sort of drive this day to day, and Nicole obviously has deep experiences with Dogfest, which is obviously consumer, and she was quite keen to sort of really expand her own experiences in the B2B space. And we have been talking for a number of years, so this again is not something that's just happened. This has been part of the plan, and it just takes time for the pieces of the plan to come together. That we had identified this as an interesting market. We'd obviously got to know Nicole. Like Nicole, she was sort of key in terms of pulling the pieces together. And for her, it's a big challenge in terms of coming into something that's moving fast. Being an entrepreneur is a bit lonely, and so she wanted to come and work with the Raccoon team, but also it's excited about the international expansion, and that's something new. And I think the other lesson of working with entrepreneurs is that that there's a fear element of actually making that big step, moving into the US. I mean, I had it with Mike, in that you know he hadn't run shows in Raccoon in the US, and that was one of the first things that I got involved with, is that I thought there was big opportunities for the Raccoon business in the US. Obviously, I've got 30 years of experience of working in the US, so for me, it's quite normal. Whereas for them, it's new. So just giving them the confidence to go and helping them, I think really is what the partnership is all about. That they're the ones that are driving and creating great products, and I've got the relationships in those markets that can help them.
Thank you. I want to talk more broadly, Doug, now about M&A within the trade show and exhibition sector specifically. Obviously, when we came out of the pandemic, there was lots of activity going on, and that really has continued at pace, and there seems to be no stopping. I mean, I was just making a note before we came on air in terms of just some of the ones that I've seen recently. Closer Still Media with their deal with Partnership Network Events, and also 100% Optical from Media 10. Health was acquired by Hive recently, who also acquired Possible only in July. We've also got Informer's acquisition of Essential. Clarion, obviously based in the UK, but made an acquisition in the States, I think, of Infocast. Obviously, Terrapin have done a number of acquisitions, including Arab Live in the summer. And then we had Arc Network, led by Simon Foster. Started off over the last couple of years with 6 or 7 acquisitions. And then 19 Group as well have had their own sort of sale recently to an additional private equity fund. And that's just some of them that I sort of rattled off. I'm sure there's been lots more. Give us your view as to why you think this is continuing at such pace, and Do you think we're in? And I guess second one, do you think there's danger of a bubble building up here that it's not sustainable?
Well, it's quite interesting because there was what's driving this. That there was a lot of family-owned businesses where the major asset of the family is the trade show. And in 2019, they were thinking about selling maybe in the next 3-4 years. And then they went through the pandemic, and then suddenly maybe the asset that they thought was worth a lot of money wasn't worth a lot of money. And basically, it's taken until 23, the end of 23, to produce a set of numbers for most of those family businesses that were either back to or ahead of 19. So I think you've got a lot of pent up there in terms of businesses that were going to sell, had to go through that whole cycle of rebuilding post pandemic, and are now coming to market. But if you look at volumes in 23, they were half of historical levels in terms of M&A. So I think what you've got is just, if you like, a catch up of M&A that didn't happen in the last 3 years. I don't think it's a bubble. I think the other trend, which is quite interesting, is, one of my concerns in the pandemic was, will our business, our industry, become less attractive to private equity? Because one of the attractions was almost that annuity nature, the rebooking, the consistent growth of our businesses. That whole sort of thesis was shattered, where the industry stopped, revenues were zero. But actually, what has happened, and what is, private equity has come back stronger into our sector. And speaking to a very large private equity firm a couple of weeks ago, their thesis is very clear that actually our industry is stronger and better today than it was before the pandemic. Everybody really understands the value of face to face, and people get to see customers. They know customers are real, and they see their investment, and they see what return they get in their investment. Where the opposite has happened in digital, where it had its big spike during the pandemic, but now people don't know, are they dealing with somebody who is real? There's a plethora of places to invest, whereas at least in our industry, it's very clear where the leading shows are, and where everybody goes, and you haven't got that in the digital world, and therefore the digital side has been coming off as a result. So I think the media is becoming more attractive, more private equity money coming in, and I think the other transaction, if I look at the return, you had Tarsus, you had Hive as the first sort of large scale transactions post pandemic, and just recently the Essential deal has overtaken the Tarsus deal as being the biggest deal post pandemic. So that is positive. But the thing that I think has really changed this year is actually the sale of easy fares, because there had been a number of businesses in America that tried to sell and failed, and that, I think, sort of affected sort of confidence in the sector a little bit. And I think that we got a little bit stuck. But easy fares, once easy fares moved in the summer, I think you've seen a whole lot of deals as a result of that. And I think, rather than being in a bubble, I think we'll see an acceleration of activity in 25, because there will be a number of other private equity transactions. And once private equity trade, they will actually invest more and buy other businesses. So I think we'll see more capital being deployed. And coming back to what I'm doing in terms of helping entrepreneurs, I think the industry has changed a lot. You 10 years ago, Informa wasn't really on the scene. Now it's the biggest in the world by a factor of 2 ahead of Reed. Private equity has come in and spent more and more money, and my concern is really are we seeing enough entrepreneurs coming through, new launches, new businesses, and are we doing enough to support that pipeline? And I'm not sure we are. I think it's harder and harder for entrepreneurs to launch shows. You no longer can launch a show and live off the back of advanced receipts from your exhibitors. And I think we've got to be doing more as an industry to support entrepreneurs. And one of the first steps of that, I mean, and I'm involved with a group in America called the Event Venture Group, which is basically trying to find entrepreneurs at early stages, maybe at pre-launch, or maybe they've had one cycle or so of their events, to support them to come through, to help them. And they need not only financial help, but actually they need guidance in terms of how to grow their business. And we hopefully within this month of November, the EVG will announce their first investment, and that's going to be a great case study to show entrepreneurs who have launched in a very interesting sector and how we've come in and helped them. And hopefully it's going to be the first of many.
Interesting you say that. Thank you, because I guess it's all very well private equity putting all this money in, but then that money needs to be spent, and so it needs to be spent also not on existing events but new ones as well. Otherwise, logic dictates is going to be the same events being traded every so often, and that's probably not good for anybody. So interesting, you just mentioned that group. Tell us a bit more about that, how that came about, other people that are part of it.
Yeah, so it's really as a result of Marco Gilberti. Some people might know Marco. He is very involved really in event tech, done a lot of venture investing in event tech companies, and basically he's taken that same concept into the exhibition sector. And actually, how can we find very early stage businesses and support them to come through? And Greg Topalian from Clarion, he's chairman of Clarion in the U.S., is his co-chair. So the two of them are really leading it. And we've now got a group of about 30 of the great and the good in the exhibition industry, all old people like me who have got experience and really want to help the next generation. It's very early. It's only been going literally a couple of months, and we're just bringing our first investment through.
Interesting. So watch this space on that. Thank you. Just want to turn our attention to some sort of, I guess, geopolitical, economic factors that might be affecting the exhibition and trade show industry in certain parts of the world. We just had the budget in the UK.
Yeah.
Lots of talk of the impact of that. Obviously, increase in employee national insurance, also changes to CGT tax thresholds. Do you see that as impacting at all on some of the deals that might happen in the future, or the size of them, or the pace, or?
I I see it as having a real impact on, I think the budget was very anti-business. I think it was very anti-entrepreneur. And our industry is all about entrepreneurs growing businesses. And I think if you take out a lot of the incentive for people to do that, it's going to impact in our industry. So it's coming back to my earlier comments. I've got real concerns that we're not seeing enough support for entrepreneurs, and now we have a government who's actually deliberately targeting business to raise money to support their campaign in terms of where they want to spend the money in terms of their projects. So I think it's going to be more difficult than it was before. And actually, I'm not political at all, but for the first time over the last few months, I've been engaging in advocacy on both sides in terms of the government and in terms of the opposition. And it's been quite eye-opening. It's been quite frustrating, and I think that there has been a lack of understanding from the new government that some of the things that they want to do will have impact on small businesses, entrepreneurs. unemployment, and not understanding that you launch a business, ultimately you might sell it and do very well, but there's lots of chapters in that book. There might be the first 2 or 3 years where you haven't actually been able to take a salary yourself. You've had to use all of your savings. You've taken huge risks, and a lot of these businesses don't succeed. It's not guaranteed. So I think that I think one of the real problems is if you look at the government, the 25 people sat around the cabinet, not a single one, not one, has had a job. They've been civil servants, they've been members of political think tanks. And I think that's the real disconnect, in that not understanding the day-to-day challenges that entrepreneurs have. It's far from easy. There's a lot of hard yards. And I think what we've got to do next is actually trying to educate them that actually this is not simple, and actually the consequences of raising taxes as they have in this budget is going to make the growth target that they want a lot more difficult. So I think we've got a lot of work to do there, which is being made harder by the budget.
Sure, and it seems obvious that what you've said, and it's not just for the exhibition industry; it's for all entrepreneurs and all
Yeah.
businesses. So I guess it's an interesting one, and watch this space. We've also got the American election coming up. In fact, when this podcast goes out, we'll probably know who the new president is. These sort of things generally, do you think they impact on people's decision making? Who's going to be the president or not? Or do you think it's a short term view? Well, give us a sense of how important these things are or not.
Well, obviously, America being the biggest market, I think it has a huge impact. I mean, I'm involved in the ECA, which is the U.S. Lobbying Association, in terms of advocacy. And actually, what people don't realize is there's major tax changes coming in 25. And like we've had in the UK, there's potentially coming in the US. And whoever sits in the White House is going to have a major impact. So if it's Trump, Trump is lower taxes, lower reduced regulation. Harris likely to be higher taxation, probably more regulation. So that has a consequence. However, on the Trump side, you've got, from a geopolitical perspective, lots of uncertainty, and he's quite clearly unpredictable. So I think a Trump presidency would in some situations be helpful, on others potentially highly damaging. Harris probably more likely to be economically more difficult but more stable. And I think that's the choices. And I mean, my political friends, as you say, you probably know the results, but at the moment, they described it in America, I think quite well, as it's a knife fight in a telephone box. It is that close.
As I said, we will know the result by the time this goes out. I was going to ask you just finally to get your crystal ball. I don't know if you've got one in front of you. And actually, I should do that as a feature. I should actually we're coming to the end of towards the end of 2024. Any particular trends that you think you might want to talk about as we enter into 25 and beyond? This year was definitely, I think, when I spoke to people this time last year, it was about artificial intelligence and the impact on the industry. Anything that you want to sort of give us your view on going into 25? You think it's going to be front and center?
And I think what's quite interesting is what has changed, and I think AI is going to get more and more important. I agree. I think the M&A side and the additional capital being invested by private equity, it's going to continue. It's going to be quite interesting. The rise of the Middle East is going to be another theme. On the other side, you've got the geopolitical challenges and the weakness in China being, it's the second biggest trade show market in the world, and actually, the lack of international participation and the softness in the domestic market is meaning overall that geography is a lot softer than it ever has been in living memory. So those things are all important. Then on the other side, which I think is interesting and people don't talk about, is the hot topics used to be DEI, sustainability. And especially in America, they've really gone down the list of priorities. And I think it'll be interesting to see how that evolves and what the debate is, because I think the danger with both of them is, we throw the baby out with the bathwater. There's lots of good things in there, and it would be a shame to lose them. And I think where it goes, especially led by America, a lot of it will depend who's sitting in the White House. So I think that's going to be an interesting space to watch over the next year.
Doug, thank you as ever for giving up your time. It's always fascinating listening to you. Congratulations on everything that's been achieved with your respective businesses over the last 15 months since we last spoke. And I look forward, as we all do, to some other announcements coming down the line.
Thanks, Dan. It's been good to catch up, and I look forward to speaking in 15 months' time.
I'm sure we'll get you on before that.